It's day 7 of the Daily Mario, and just as the Lord rested on the 7th day, so too have I rested with my stage-creating ambitions. Instead of making new levels today, what I've done is gone back and taken the existing levels that I've been building over the past week, spent some time refining them, and then let a less experienced gamer play them. Specifically, I looked to my wife, who plays video games sometimes, to a certain degree, lots of word games, puzzle games, and, curiously enough, Metroidvania games, but not really a lot of Mario platformers. So she seemed like the perfect audience to give my beginner-appropriate stages a test. Someone who knows how video games work, but doesn't necessarily have those connections and commands hardwired into the past of her brain. So the big question was, were the 1-1 style levels that I created yesterday really the kind of games that someone could ease themselves into a Mario game with? That's kind of been my big ambition for the past few days, making friendly, accessible, and intuitive levels. So this has been kind of the litmus test to see just how friendly and accessible they really are. And it's been interesting watching my wife play, because there are some things that work just as I had hoped, and other things that don't work the way I planned. It's also kind of refreshing to see the way she approaches the stages, because for someone who's played a lot of Mario games and kind of knows their way through the series, stages just kind of become these obstacle courses, but when someone is less familiar and less experienced with the games, they tend to take a little more time working their way through, and you start to appreciate the density of the levels and the way different things are structured. But you also see places where design isn't necessarily as good as it can be. The Gambling Goombas stage I made, I thought was good for kind of an opening level for a Mario game, but I noticed she had a lot of trouble with the note blocks, the bouncy, springy platform blocks. She got the idea behind them, but had trouble mastering the timing of them. So that's really not appropriate for an opening stage. While I didn't actually want to change that element of the stage because it is built pretty carefully into the fabric of it, it does at least kind of make me pause and say, maybe this should go later in the game. I also noticed certain other little hang-ups in the design, such as the fire flower midway through the stage. While that's pretty easy for someone who knows the physics of Mario really well to get, it's much more difficult for her because she would have to master the ability to sort of bend Mario's aerial trajectory in the middle of a jump. So she had a really hard time getting the fire flower. Likewise, the gap in the middle of the bricks right after the bridge threw her for a loop. And that's a failing more of the way the background looks. The hills in the background behind that gap make it hard to tell that there actually is a gap there. So after watching her play, I went back through and did some refining on the stage. I closed up the gap in that in front of the hills. She killed herself accidentally by hitting the invisible Starman in the middle of a jump, which is Super Mario Bros. 2 levels of sort of unfairness, so I moved that around. I also widened the platform beneath the fire flower so it's easier to get to. Once I made these minor tweaks, the results were pretty impressive. She managed to get through the stage on her first go. So it was just a matter of sort of fine-tuning these couple of little hang-ups and smoothing over the stage design, and it really made a world of difference. Much to my surprise, she had a much easier time with the second level I showed off yesterday, which I thought was more of an advanced stage with its moving platforms, but she had a much easier time with that than she had with the Gambling Goombas stage. The biggest hang-up was actually at the beginning of the level, where there's a very kind of difficult jump that you have to run. You have to do a dashing jump across. That's something that's still not quite intuitive for her, so she kept falling into a pit. I raised the ground where you jump and lowered the ground where you land, so it's much easier to make the jump with just a standard leap. Having done that, she had a much easier time with the stage, made it through on her second or third try. One part that I was actually really happy with was the bridge with the munchers underneath, which she leapt on, assuming that it was going to cause her damage, not realizing the bridge was an interactive stage element that she could jump onto. So she expected to take damage there but didn't, but it made her more aware of the munchers that came up ahead in an open pit. There's some pretty decent ideas on display here, and little interactions that I never expected, like her kicking one of the green Koopas that falls off the high platform at the end of the stage into the other. There's a certain satisfaction in taking revenge on the bad guys, I think. The underwater stage from day 3 was pretty accessible, pretty manageable for her. There were a couple of little hangups, one of which was a mistake. For some reason, I'd accidentally put a question block in the middle of spikes lining the top of the stage, which should not have been there, and she kept being drawn to that to hit it, which wasn't really my intention. So I took that out and took out a couple of the spiked mines that were closing up the path toward the final double back on the stage, and that made it pretty manageable. Some of the other levels, the very first two levels that I made, turned out to be really difficult, especially the second stage that I had made, which makes me realize, actually, watching her, that it's just not very well designed. So I think that one needs to be scrapped entirely, just thrown out and started over on. But I was pleasantly surprised by how well she did on the final of the stages, the castle stage. She didn't finish it, but she had a really easy time getting most of the way through it, about halfway through. I figured that was more of an expert level stage, and it does get pretty tough with the fire flying and the bullets and the moving platforms and the fire bars all at once as you make it to the halfway point of the stage, but it was generally more approachable than some of the other stages I had made. So, again, just watching someone else play through these games, someone who doesn't necessarily have a mastery of the Mario vocabulary, as it were, was really informative, and I feel, has helped me refine these designs a lot. So I guess the lesson here is force other people to play your stages, otherwise you'll never get any better. Anyway, that's it for this day. We're getting near the end, so I'll try to do something interesting for tomorrow or Friday. We'll see, no promises. Thanks for watching.